Concepts, Values and Wise Advice from the Billy Meier Context compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Neutrality. See also Opinions.
Contact Report 832.
Neutrality means, therefore, that no side is favored and that no interference of any kind takes place. Consequently, neither aiding nor abetting a party, opponents of belligerents or disputants, etc., by which is meant absolutely no party or partiality in politics, but an opposing side, for example, in a war or dispute. Neutrality, which in every manner prohibits, for example, that weapons of any kind may be supplied to parties to the conflict, just as neutrality also prohibits that weapons supplied in peacetime to a state or to any person may subsequently be passed on to a party to the conflict, or to several parties. Sanctions are also included, because these are a form of warfare, which is prohibited by neutrality in any form from being used.
Contact Report 836.
Neutrality is an attitude that at best avoids potential opponents preemptively attacking a neutral country in the event of war. Neutrality, a word that comes from Latin, from neuter, actually means non-interference, or neither, where what is meant is that precisely neither should be sided with.
Now, neutrality, as we understand it, means that the human being never takes a stand for one side or the other in any form or manner, etc., never interferes. Never interferes, and thus never does or thinks anything that affects one or the other side, either in a good, that is to say right, or in a bad, that is to say wrong way. A real true neutrality is of endless duration, and thus perpetual and completely independent of any other state, alliance or organization, etc. if. However, an alliance is entered into in the form of a political manner and cooperation with another state, then it is absolutely without exception necessary that, in addition to exactly the same neutrality, the same legislation prevails in every respect in every form and has all-round unlimited validity. Namely, the legislation must be such that it may never include a life in its existence and never a death penalty of any kind in a punishment. Humanitarian aid, on the other hand, is of course also permitted under neutrality, as are neutral peace negotiations and, equally, completely neutral observation and resulting reporting as information for the populations, from whom world events are never to be concealed.
So neutrality means what I have actually always known, that the neutral human being must not belong to either of two sides, and not even when it touches on the personal sphere, for example when advice has to be given. Whoever is neutral does not interfere, for which another word also states that being neutral also means being impartial. Consequently, the human being does not join any party. Consequently, governments would also have to be completely neutral and must not consist of any parties. By party is also meant, therefore, a partisanship in politics, and it must be understood that this is completely wrong, because it does not allow a neutral attitude to be displayed. This is because no real consensus can be achieved, but as a rule, only having to submit to the majority, because no agreement can be reached through partisanship. With a party system there is no peace and no freedom, but one side is always at odds with the other. As I mentioned earlier, the word neutrality comes from the Latin language, from neuter, which means neither. As early as the end of the Middle Ages, so around 1550 or so, human beings already knew the French word neutralité, which was later also adopted into the languages of Swiss German and German. At that time, human beings understood that neutrality was simply that, in a war, neither side should be supported, and nothing should ever be done in any manner against one side or the other. And when neutrality is spoken of today, in 2023, it still has the same meaning and value as the understanding of the human beings of that time. in everyday life. 2. Neutrality is often spoken of in terms of how the human being must behave neutrally in many specific situations, such as when something is to be judged, which leaves no other option but precisely to be neutral. This is especially the case in any direction of arbitration, since being neutral is absolutely obligatory. Consequently, everything must be handled and treated in this manner impartially. To judge a matter with the help of neutrality, or even to decide who is right and who is wrong, requires absolute neutrality, which does not allow any manner of partiality. In doing so, all moments must also be judged correctly, and all parties must be treated equally, whereby sympathy or antipathy, friendship or enmity, etc., must be absolutely irrelevant. In a dispute between two human beings, for arbitration, etc., both are to be treated equally. Also, all are to be treated according to the same rule of impartiality and impartiality. If there are several opinions and disputes on a subject, whereby opinions are always wrong and void, because they are only based on assumptions, presumptions and ideas, as well as possibly on prejudices, then the opponents must also be treated equally, and it must be pointed out to them, and they must be instructed that only a complete clarification of the effective facts of reality and their truth can bring clarity, after which only the correctness or incorrectness can be judged. To be neutral, and to speak and act in every manner, neutrally always, and in every case means that the human being in question is knowledgeable enough about neutrality as a whole, and must also be responsible. Only a human being who is effectively classified according to this value is able to preserve neutrality in every respect, and to decide and act in accordance with it. If, however, a human being cannot do this, then he also does not understand the meaning of neutrality and its value. Consequently, he effectively thinks and acts contrary to it. It is truly not always easy to maintain neutrality in everyday life, because decisions are not always easy to make in private, because many factors influence clear thinking every day, insofar as one thinks at all and does not simply believe through illusory thinking, as is the case with human beings who are under the delusion of God. The truly thinking and consequently not simply believing human being has to exclude his feelings if he wants to decide neutrally. This means that he may only see, consider, and judge reality and its truth if he wants to make a correct decision. He must not have a private or political opinion, but is obliged towards himself never to have such an opinion, because an opinion is always wrong. Consequently, it is only correct if he decides and acts only according to the given facts of reality and its truth. Never should an attempt be made in this connection to influence and win over another human being or a particular political party, etc., in any manner whatsoever, in such a way as to bring about a conviction, for such a conviction is fundamentally wrong, and is based on persuasion rather than on independent thinking and decision-making on the part of the human being concerned.
Contact Report 840.
Remain permanently neutral in what is your opinion, what you say, represent, and otherwise express. Do not politicize when you put forward your opinion, but say in a neutral wise what is right and what is wrong. But do not be in the form of a personal for or against concerning a thing or an event, etc., to be thought or done, but be neutral in expressing yourself. For it is wrong to take the side of one or the other, for only what is right or wrong can and must ever be said, and this regardless of whether it is a matter of thought or deed, for that makes no relevant difference to quarrel and argue about.
Contact Report 845.
Any form of partisan statement, that is to say a justification or non-justification of one or the other party, is never in my sense, which corresponds to remaining neutral.
Contact Report 851.
For my part, I am truly neutral, and consequently have no opinion whatsoever, because such an opinion always implies that a biased opinion is connected with it, in every respect. But since I really do think absolutely neutrally, I have no partisan direction to take in any respect, and consequently also no judgment to make and no saying as to what is correct with regard to a partisanship and therefore what is of the wrong or right of one side or the other. correctly. I cannot and must not behave and align myself in this wise, but only neutrally ascertain what is actually present and reveal myself in such a manner that I simply name what is effectively given, is currently happening, or will have this and that effect for the future. And if it is a question of assessing any action, thing or occurrence, etc., then this must be independent of an opinion, but only insist on thinking in absolute logic and realizing that of the whole the logical result can inevitably only be that which has been logically fathomed. Consequently, this alone proves that having an opinion is based on thinking in an effectively biased manner instead of neutrally. That is to say, on assessing one side as good and the other side as bad. This, however, absolutely contradicts neutrality, because it does not simply state the existing facts, but favors one party and disadvantages the other. So considered correctly, having an opinion means that the whole thing corresponds to complete partisanship, because an opinion is never neutral, but always biased towards one side or the other, and thus not in accordance with neutrality. Sooner or later, and in any case, having an opinion always leads to quarrels, which not infrequently leads to war between countries, and among human beings themselves, often to enmity, hatred, revenge and retaliation, as ultimately to murder and manslaughter, whereby not infrequently everything is controlled in the background by a religiously dependent belief, which stimulates and evokes ambitions of power theories, possession, as well as of torture, torment and massacre in human beings. And, arising from belief, religious or secular, one opinion is inevitably acute, and that is mainly that evil should be repaid with evil, and which is that like should be punished with like, as it happens, for example, in the case of murder with the death penalty, by which the killing is to be atoned for. In so doing, however, every opinion is wrong throughout the lives of human beings, for to have and hold such an opinion is always fundamentally wrong as well as biased, and leads at least to misunderstanding, conflict, discord, then to injustice and inhumanity, to discord, war and other murder and manslaughter as a result of evil strife, of hatred, revenge, retaliation or greed, etc.
Contact Report 855.
But it is still to be said that it is very regrettable if it is not understood that the human being should remain neutral in all things of life, in his behavior and in his dealings with other human beings and with everything in general. Now, in all my travels, where and with whichever human beings with the most diverse customs, traditions and religions or other beliefs, peculiarities, views, behavior and other things I have always been for short or long periods, sometimes several months, I have never caused offense. I have always behaved neutrally towards everything and everyone, whereby I could, of course, openly bring up everything I had learned, what moved me and occupied me, and never did problems or anything negative arise as a result of my religious non-belief in a God, as well as in the knowledge of the creation and the explanations of its existence. Well, my profession was everywhere in the world and in every country and at all times of my life, to always maintain absolute neutrality in all customs and all ways of thinking of a human being in every situation. Thus I met every human being with a belief of every kind, whether religious, secular, atheistic, or nature-loving, fully and completely with respect, and this also in such a way that I observed absolutely every form of religious or secular customs and traditions neutrally, and did not allow myself to form an opinion about correct or wrong, or to represent this. Having an opinion is always wrong in any case, because such an opinion is always based only on assumptions, but never on absolute certainty, which is based solely on effective truth. And thus, by living neutrality alone, it is avoided that, for example, customs and traditions of other countries or human beings are not respected, are attacked, or are simply spoiled. A human being, however, who cannot be neutral and consequently cannot accept, for example, one human being's customs or religious or secular beliefs, should refrain from speaking out loudly. Human beings whose behavior is different from common practice, etc., are to be accepted as they are. However, the human being who does not like this should think about himself and try to regulate himself in order to become a true human being and to treat his neighbor correctly and let him be as he is and live according to his customs and traditions, which are nobody's business but his own, and according to which he lives righteously.
Contact Report 856.
So neutrality from time immemorial means that it must be preserved under all circumstances, and that really nothing must ever be done in any process that could even slightly violate it. Neutral has really and truly meant neutrality since time immemorial, and only the slightest action or thought in the form of anything other than remaining absolutely neutral in every conceivable process and maintaining neutrality would be a breach of neutrality, which would be totally against logic, reason, rationality, and every sense of responsibility, and consequently against every feeling in this regard, deviant and reprehensible.
In other words, this would be or is a sign that the human being in question who is doing this, just violating or breaking neutrality, is not educated and is incapable of standing up for it and upholding it. Not to mention that such people do not belong in a government.